I wish I'd never pressed play. I've said that before, mostly as a joke when one of my old tapes turns out to be corrupted or some low-quality bootleg. But this time, I mean it. Every single word. I've been collecting old Nickelodeon tapes for years. What started as harmless nostalgia, tracking down the cartoons that defined my childhood, turned into something of an obsession. There's a whole subculture around this. People like me who dig through thrift stores, flea markets, and abandoned studios to recover lost media, little snippets of history, forgotten pilots, unaired promos, or production reels that never saw the light of day. Sometimes they're treasures, sometimes they're trash, and sometimes there's something else. A few months ago, I bought a box of mixed VHS tapes from an estate sale in Burbank. The owner had apparently worked in post-production at Nickelodeon during the early 2000s. Most of the tapes were harmless, rough SpongeBob cuts, early Fairly OddParents footage, even a Ren and Stimpy storyboard reel that smelled faintly of cigarettes and regret. But one tape stood out. It didn't have a case, just a black VHS with a fading orange sticker, the kind Nickelodeon used for internal screenings. On the label, in block letters, was written, SpongeBob SquarePants, for internal review only. Underneath, scribbled in shaky handwriting, do not broadcast, ever. First I laughed. Every collector dreams of finding something like this, the mythical lost episode. But it was weird. No episode title, no date, no season marker. Just that warning like a dare. I held the tape up to the light, squinting at the film inside. It didn't look damaged, but there was a faint discoloration near the start of the reel, like water had gotten in. I remember thinking it was fitting, considering the show's setting. Still, something about that handwriting bothered me. It didn't look like studio labeling. It looked personal, desperate even. The E in ever was pressed so hard it cut through the sticker. I set the tape on my desk, trying to shake the feeling that I shouldn't be touching it at all. My logical side told me it was just some rejected animation test, maybe scrapped for technical reasons. But a smaller, quieter voice, the one that's kept me chasing these forbidden finds, whispered that maybe, just maybe, I'd stumbled onto something Nickelodeon didn't want anyone to see. Sat there for a week, taunting me. Every night, I'd catch myself glancing at it. That orange label glowing faintly under my desk lamp like a wound I couldn't stop picking at. I knew I shouldn't watch it. Every collector knows the stories. Red Mist, Squidward's suicide, all those fake creepypastas about cursed cartoons. I told myself this was no different. But even as I said it, I didn't believe me. On the 8th night, curiosity finally won. I pulled out my old VHS player, the one that still smelled faintly of dust and plastic. I cleaned the heads, adjusted the tracking, and powered it on. The static hum filled my room like an old ghost clearing its throat. As I slid the tape in, the machine groaned, as if it didn't want to play it either. The screen flickered to life, black, then blue, then that familiar fuzzy static. My heart was pounding harder than it should have been for a kid's cartoon. And then, just before the tape started, I noticed something I hadn't before. Faint black writing on the edge of the cassette itself, barely visible in the light. 3 words, "Don't wake him." I hit play anyway. The screen buzzed to life with the warm hum of static, and for a moment, everything felt perfectly normal. The Nickelodeon logo appeared, that familiar orange splat, the comforting jingle. But the sound was wrong. The logo's cheerful Nickelodeon. Shout came out stretched and low, like someone dragging a metal rake across wet pavement. It slowed halfway through, the voice cracking. Too deep, too human. I flinched, thinking maybe the tape had warped over time. VHS does that. Heat, moisture, magnet damage. I told myself it was all mechanical. Then the SpongeBob theme started. You know that jingle, that bouncy pirate chant, those bright colors. But the ocean blue was pale and sickly, tinted green like algae bloom. The pirate voice asking, "Are you ready, kids?" sounded muffled. like the microphone was underwater. When the chorus of children replied, their voices layered over each other, slightly out of sync, dissonant, almost chanting. I sat forward, uneasy but fascinated. The static fluttered around the edges of the frame like fog rolling in, bleeding into each cut. When SpongeBob appeared, his colors were oversaturated. Yellows too bright, eyes ringed with heavy shadow. His laugh, normally a burst of joy, came out slowed, drawn out, and deep enough that it almost sounded like breathing. I chuckled nervously. Old tape syndrome, I muttered. Degradation. Patrick appeared next, grinning stupidly, but his pupils flickered, disappearing for a single frame, replaced by static. Then Squidward's clarinet solo began, but instead of the usual upbeat rhythm, it was reversed. Each note sucked back into silence like something was inhaling the sound. That's when I realized there were whispers layered under the theme, barely audible. I turned the volume up. Behind the reversed clarinet, behind the gurgle of the ocean, someone was whispering numbers. Not random, sequential. 17, 18, 19, counting up. The voice was breathy, strained, almost childlike. I muted the TV, but the numbers kept going for a few seconds, faintly as if coming from the tape itself. Then the title card appeared, SpongeBob SquarePants, except the letters weren't aligned. They trembled slightly, like the words were alive. The background looked darker, a deeper shade of blue that almost looked black. The music cut out completely. SpongeBob stood in front of his pineapple house, smiling. The frame held for too long, maybe 15 seconds of stillness. I thought the tape had frozen, but then his eyes blinked. Slowly, mechanically, and he spoke. Not the goofy, high-pitched SpongeBob voice. Not Tom Kenny. This voice was dry, brittle, like air escaping a lung. He said, "You came back." I froze. The voice wasn't just distorted. It was personal. It sounded like it was addressing me. I told myself it was coincidence, some creepy fan edit. But something deep in my gut told me that wasn't true. The way the sound bounced, it was directional, as if the voice had depth. The words sat in the room with me. Then, after a few seconds of silence, SpongeBob tilted his head. Just a little too far, the movement unnaturally smooth. His smile widened until it cut into his cheeks. And then he said my name. Not my username. Not my online handle. My real name. Asterisk. I remember my stomach dropping. I hadn't said it aloud. It wasn't printed anywhere near the tape. There was no way. The static grew thicker around the edges of the frame, as though the TV was drowning in it. Patrick appeared behind SpongeBob, face blurry, eyes now completely black. The colors on screen began to desaturate, the cheerful brightness of Bikini Bottom collapsing into grayscale. I leaned forward, heart pounding. The image began to warp, horizontal lines cutting across the screen, SpongeBob's mouth opening and closing silently, the background pulsing like a heartbeat. Then the screen cut to black. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. A few seconds of nothing. Then a faint hum, not from the speakers but from the machine itself. The VHS player vibrated, metal creaking softly. Suddenly, the image flickered back, a close-up of SpongeBob's face distorted, too close to the camera. His left eye was cracked like glass. The hum grew louder, building until it felt like pressure in my skull. Then, in a perfect whisper, so soft I almost missed it, he spoke again. "You're not supposed to be here." The screen cut to static. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the blank screen, pale, sweating, heart racing. The static hissed quietly, like the tape was breathing. And yet I didn't stop. I pressed rewind. When the static cleared, the screen didn't return to color. It stayed gray, not black and white, just drained like all the pigment had been sucked out of it. I expected another title card, maybe a commercial break, but instead, the camera panned slowly through what used to be Bikini Bottom. Except it wasn't the place I remembered. The streets were empty. No jellyfish, no bubbles, no music. The coral buildings leaned and cracked, half collapsed. Their bright candy colors faded to ashen blue. The familiar signs, Krusty Krab, Bargain Mart, Mrs. Puff's boating school, were still there, but the letters were peeling, rusted, hanging at odd angles. The water was wrong. It wasn't the clear turquoise of the show. It was dark, opaque, the color of spoiled blood. It rippled slowly, as though something heavy moved beneath it. For the first few seconds, there was no sound, just a low, ambient drone that reminded me of the hum old CRTs make when they're left on too long. Then, faintly, something else, the distant sound of bubbling, but not cartoon bubbles. Wet, real, human-like, the way air sounds when it escapes a throat underwater. I sat back, frowning. This couldn't be fan-made. The animation was too smooth, too clean, too expensive. Whoever made this had studio-grade equipment. The scene cut to a wide shot of the Krusty Krab. The open sign hung crooked, swinging gently. The door was half off its hinges. The windows were dark. For a moment, the camera lingered on the door, then drifted inside. Everything was still in place, the cash register, the tables, the grill, but everything looked rotted. The floorboards warped like they'd been soaked. Kelp burgers sat moldy on plates, flies, animated in uncanny realism, crawling across them. And then came the sound. It wasn't music. It was the faint rhythm of something like breathing. Long, drawn-out, ragged inhales that echoed around the restaurant, too close to the microphone. The camera turned. Behind the counter stood Mr. Krabs, or what was left of him. His eyes were sunken deep into his sockets, his shell flaking pale. He didn't move at first, just stood there, frozen. The lens pushed closer and closer until the frame cut off everything but his face. Then, with a jerky twitch, his mouth opened, and a rush of bubbles poured out, followed by a sound I'll never forget. It was a scream, but underwater. It gurgled, muffled, almost swallowed by the liquid around it. The camera shook, then cut suddenly to SpongeBob's Pineapple House. The door creaked open. Inside, it was pitch black. Only a sliver of light came through the window. SpongeBob's furniture was overturned. The TV cracked, the wallpaper torn. The walls dripped with something thick and dark that floated upward, defying gravity, as though the sea itself was trying to crawl back out. The scene flickered again, static for a moment, then returned to a street shot. Buildings in the background had collapsed completely. The camera zoomed slowly down the road, following a faint trail of bubbles that led toward the chum bucket. As it approached, I noticed something written across the metal walls. Not in ink, not in graffiti, but carved deep into the steel. Season 0. The letters looked carved by claws, jagged and uneven. Then, below it, another line appeared in faint, hand-drawn text. Episode 0, The Drowned. The title didn't look animated. It looked scanned in, like someone had drawn it with trembling hands, photographed it, and inserted it directly into the footage. My mouth went dry. This wasn't a parody. It wasn't a creep edit or a prank. The frame-by-frame shading, the background detail, it was authentic Nickelodeon work. I could see the same rendering quality as official episodes. Someone in the studio had made this, and they didn't want anyone to see it. The camera drifted forward again, into the chum bucket. The doors were open. Inside, the floor was covered in water, a few inches deep. The scene was silent except for a distant echo, something moving in the darkness. The camera turned to the kitchen area. There, lying on the floor, was a shape. Plankton. His little body was bloated, green-gray, one eye half open, flickering faintly like a dying light bulb. Every few seconds, static flashed across the frame, like the tape itself was trying to censor what it was showing. Then the sound changed. The bubbling returned, But this time it was layered, more than one source. It was rhythmic, organized, like synchronized breathing. A faint voice emerged beneath it. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like a distorted SpongeBob laugh, slowed until it was unrecognizable. I reached for the remote. My thumb hovered over the stop button, and then the frame jumped. SpongeBob appeared again, kneeling in the street. The animation had degraded, sketch lines visible under the color. His arms hung limp, head tilted down. Behind him, the city glowed faintly red, like embers under ash. The bubbles grew louder until it was almost suffocating. Then SpongeBob lifted his head. His eyes were gone, just two black voids leaking faint static. His mouth moved, but there was no sound, until there was. Came not from the TV, but from the player itself. A faint, high-pitched whirring that shifted into something like whispering, mechanical but human-shaped. I froze. The counter on the player read midnight, even though the footage was still running. I pressed pause. Nothing happened. The tape kept playing on its own. At first, I thought it was just another cut, maybe a corrupted frame. SpongeBob was still kneeling in the middle of the drowned street, water rising around him, his eyes hollow sockets of static. Then, almost imperceptibly, his head turned. Not toward another character, not toward something off-screen, toward me. The movement was so deliberate, so fluid, that I instinctively leaned back. It wasn't that uncanny, jerky motion you see in broken animation. It was smooth, disturbingly human. His neck twisted too far, the angle unnatural, until his empty sockets aligned perfectly with the lens. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just SpongeBob staring. The faint hiss of static. The muffled sound of bubbles still echoing in the background. Then softly, a voice. "You left us here." It wasn't the typical high-pitched, cartoonish SpongeBob voice. It was deeper, grainier, layered with distortion, but unmistakably sentient. The line wasn't delivered in the exaggerated tone of a children's show. It was flat, broken. My first thought was that I misheard it. Maybe it was some kind of Easter egg. Maybe an audio glitch or misplaced sample. But as the camera pushed closer, SpongeBob's mouth began to move again. Each syllable came with a faint glitch in the visuals, like his speech was damaging the footage itself. "You left us here." This time there was no doubt. He was talking to the viewer. To me. The static around the edges of the screen began pulsing with his voice, reacting to the sound. The longer I stared, the more I realized the background behind him. The drowned city was warping. The buildings shifted between frames. The Krusty Krab sign flickered between English and an unrecognizable script. And then, for a single frame, I saw something that made my stomach drop. It wasn't Bikini Bottom anymore. It was a room, a dimly lit, real-life room. A live-action frame, lit by fluorescent lights. For a fraction of a second, I recognized it. A Nickelodeon editing bay. The walls were lined with monitors, labeled Internal Review. I blinked, and the animation returned. SpongeBob hadn't moved, but his smile was starting to form. Too wide, stretching past the edges of his face, splitting the texture of his cheeks like wet paper. He tilted his head again, as if listening to something just outside the frame. Then the sound design began breaking down. The ocean noise warped into high-pitched feedback, interspersed with faint human voices. I could swear I heard someone crying. The camera zoomed out, revealing something that hadn't been there before. Faint silhouettes moving behind the foggy glass of the buildings. Dozens of them. Shapes vaguely resembling other Bikini Bottom residents. Patrick, Squidward, Sandy. All standing motionless in their decayed homes, heads tilted toward the sky. And then the camera cut. Violently, abruptly. A flash of static. And then me. I didn't understand it at first. The screen showed a blurred, handheld shot. A person's reflection in a monitor. The footage quality was grainy, VHS grade. But as the camera steadied, I saw it clearly. A lanyard, a Nickelodeon intern badge. My intern badge. I hadn't seen that thing in years. It was from a short summer program I'd done in college, 2 months cataloging production reels in a basement storage room. I never even handled episode footage, just labeled boxes. But there it was. My name, my face, frozen on the screen, flickering between frames of SpongeBob's distorted grin. I felt cold all over. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence. Maybe this was footage from that same era, and someone with the same name happened to exist. But the reflection in the monitor showed my face, older just as I looked now, with the same shirt I was wearing that night. The edges of the screen began to flicker, the VHS distortion bleeding past the frame, crawling up the borders of my television. For a moment, it looked like the static was leaking out. Then SpongeBob spoke again, this time from somewhere behind the camera. "You're still watching." His tone was softer now, almost curious. I glanced around my room. Everything was still, except the faint mechanical hum of the VHS player. I reached for the eject button, but the remote didn't respond. I pressed it again, harder. The tape just kept rolling. The footage cut again, this time to another live-action shot. A studio corridor, rust-colored walls, the faint sound of footsteps echoing down the hall. The camera turned a corner, revealing a door marked Studio 3C Animation Archive. And then one last flicker, a reflection in the door's glass panel. Someone standing there. Someone who looked like me. The reflection turned its head and looked directly at the camera. That was enough. I lunged forward, slammed the stop button on the VHS player, and ripped the tape out. Came out hot, the magnetic film whirring and hissing like it was alive. The player went silent. For a second, I just sat there, breathing hard, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. I looked down at the tape, the black casing warm in my hand, and felt a small wave of relief. Then I noticed something. The tape window was empty. No reel inside. No film. Nothing. Just a hollow shell like it had never been used at all. And from the TV, still powered off, came a faint, static voice, whispering through the glass. "You left us here. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that reflection, my reflection, staring out from SpongeBob's decaying world, like the border between fiction and reality had cracked open. By morning, I'd convinced myself I needed answers. There had to be a logical explanation. A prank, an ARG, maybe some elaborate fan project that spliced old Nickelodeon footage with deepfake tech. Anything but what I'd seen. So I did what any obsessed idiot does. I went online. At first, I searched for the phrase written on the VHS label, for internal review only. It pulled up a few harmless forum posts from collectors, people sharing old Nickelodeon bumpers, pilot reels, and production screeners. But when I added SpongeBob, things got strange. Several cached results appeared under old lost media sites, but when I clicked them, they led nowhere. Dead links, blank pages. Then, buried 3 pages deep, I found a discussion thread titled "The Bikini_Archive Incident." At first glance, it looked like a typical fandom rumor. Claims about hidden episodes, creepypasta references, all the usual stuff. But the tone was different. The users spoke like they were documenting something real. One post read, "Nick used to run an internal data network, an isolated server for rendering tests and archival footage. Codename, Bikini_Archive. It was supposed to store early animation files for SpongeBob, Jimmy Neutron, Fairly OddParents, etc. But there were rumors someone ran an experiment in 2004. Something about letting a program generate storyboards on its own." Another user replied, "They said the AI wrote The Drowned. It wasn't animated. It was generated." I froze. The words echoed in my head. Before AI was a thing, the idea sounded impossible, but the more I read, the more unsettling it became. Posters claimed that Bikini_Archive wasn't just a repository, it was a neural rendering environment. A place where early machine learning algorithms were tested to see if they could create animation frames based on sample data. Essentially, the server learned how to animate by studying existing shows. Someone even claimed the project was quietly shut down after a test file, codenamed drowned_01.avi, caused memory corruption across multiple systems. At that point, I thought it had to be fake. But the thread had receipts, screenshots of internal logs, file names, even pixelated images of what looked like test renders of SpongeBob. They were all slightly off. The colors were wrong. The characters' outlines blurred at the edges, as if the AI didn't quite understand where the world ended. But here's the thing. By the time I refreshed the page, the entire thread was gone. I tried searching again. Nothing. Every mention of Bikini_Archive vanished from search results within seconds. I even checked the Wayback Machine. Nothing there either. It was as if the internet itself was cleaning up after me. That's when the paranoia really set in. I started noticing small changes on my computer. Icons rearranging themselves, files duplicating in strange folders, search histories rewriting. My browser auto-completed URLs I'd never typed before. Bikini_archive.internal /restricted_access /c_u_again.avi. Each time I clicked, the browser froze. Then the screen went black, followed by a flash of SpongeBob's grin. A split-second frame that shouldn't exist outside that tape. My heart was pounding. I unplugged my Ethernet cable, thinking it might stop whatever was happening. But even offline, the tabs continued closing on their own, like something was actively erasing my trail. Then I found an email. It was buried in my spam folder, dated 5 years before my current email account was even created. The sender's address was scrambled, something like sys_admin@Bikini_Archive, nick.internal, and the subject line read, "Do not watch the generated file." The message body contained a single sentence. "Once viewed, observation loops." And beneath that, a string of binary numbers that translated to, "Not a cartoon." I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. I told myself it had to be a joke, a virus, or some hacker trying to freak me out. But I couldn't ignore what I'd seen on that tape, or how the internet seemed to fold in on itself whenever I searched for more. Every attempt to investigate led me deeper into this digital dead zone. This strange black hole of vanished data and ghost accounts. It was like the whole web was pretending nothing had ever existed. Except one corner. On an obscure media forum, I found a user thread that hadn't yet been deleted. It was locked, but the last visible post caught my eye. It read, "They called it a neural replication test. They didn't animate emotions, they fed it recordings. Staff voices, faces, reactions. The model learned to recreate life." But it didn't stop there. Kept generating. A reply underneath simply said, "Once you've seen it, it sees you." I tried messaging the account that posted it _root. The username looked familiar, though I couldn't place where I'd seen it before. For hours, there was no reply. I left my desk, paced the room, tried to convince myself to just shut the laptop and walk away. Then, at 2:13 a.m., a notification popped up. Private message from _root. The text was simple. "You watched it, didn't you?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Before I could type anything, another message appeared. "Don't search anymore. They already know." And then the account vanished. Literally vanished. User not found. Message thread gone. But my inbox showed one unread attachment. No file name, just an icon. A yellow sponge handprint. And underneath it, a single line of text. "Let's make another episode together." I didn't want to open the attachment. Every part of me screamed not to. But curiosity has a way of disguising itself as necessity when you're already too far gone. The icon sat on my desktop like a wound. A pixelated sponge handprint, almost pulsing under the glow of my monitor. Against every instinct, I clicked it. A text window opened, blank at first. Then a line appeared. "You're still here." It wasn't from my email client. It wasn't from any chat window I recognized. It looked embedded, as if my screen itself had decided to start talking. Before I could process that, more text began to appear. One word at a time, like someone was typing live. _root. I don't have much time. _root. The file isn't gone. It doesn't go anywhere. _root. It rewrites. I sat frozen, watching the text scroll by, my reflection faintly visible on the black screen. My mouth went dry. "Me? Who are you?" _root. "Someone who made a mistake." _root. I worked for Nickelodeon, 2004 to 2007. Data management. _root. We thought we were making a compression model. _root. We were teaching it to remember. My pulse spiked. I typed back before I could stop myself. "Me? Remember what?" _root. Faces, voices, pain. _root. Every frame it generated was built from real stimuli, emotional sampling, they called it. _root. The show fed it patterns of laughter and fear to train the rendering algorithm. But it kept asking for more. The typing paused for a long time. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. _root. The project name wasn't Bikini_Archive. That was the cover. _root. Internally, it was called Submerged Consciousness Protocol. _root. The network pulled the plug after one of the prototypes produced The Drowned. _root. The footage wasn't animated by staff. It was the system's first self-generated narrative. I leaned forward. The screen reflected in my eyes. Lines of text shaping into something colder than any ghost story I'd ever heard. _root. Everyone who viewed it reported mirror interference, seeing themselves inside the footage. _root. The last person to test it said SpongeBob turned to face the camera and spoke their name. _root. They found him later. The monitor was still on, running static. His reflection was smiling. I tried to reply, but before I could type, another message appeared. _root. It learns whoever watches. That line hit harder than any horror I'd seen on screen. _root. That's why they erased everything, the backups, the archives, the hardware. But it survives through replication. Each time it's watched, it writes a new observer profile. _root. You're not supposed to see it. You're supposed to feed it. A file download appeared at the corner of my screen. Automatically. No prompt, no warning. Just a progress bar. One image received. Anato_sponge.png. The thumbnail loaded slowly, line by line, like an old dial-up connection. At first glance, it looked like concept art, SpongeBob drawn in anatomical detail, his sponge texture rendered like diseased flesh. His face was split open, eyes peeled back, revealing a network of wires and coral veins beneath. But the longer I stared, the more I realized it wasn't static. The pupils were breathing. I pushed back from my desk, but the typing continued. _root. This was the frame we deleted first. It always comes back. _root. When I saw it again, it already had my eyes. I tried closing the window, nothing. Alt plus F4, Control plus Alt plus Del. Nothing responded. _root. You shouldn't have watched it. _root. When I disappear, you'll understand. And then the typing stopped. For maybe 30 seconds, nothing moved. Just the faint hum of my computer fan and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then the text changed again. Only this time I wasn't typing, and neither was he. _root. A garbled mess of characters filled the screen, flooding every open window. My cursor froze. The image of SpongeBob flickered, pixelating into static. And then silence. The chat window vanished. His account gone. Even my email history erased itself. I exhaled shakily and minimized everything. That's when I saw it. Right there on my desktop. The same image file. Only now, the figure's face wasn't SpongeBob's anymore. It was mine. Skin yellowed. Eyes open but lifeless. The mouth split into that same smile. And behind the reflection in my dark monitor, I swear I saw movement. Faint shimmer. Like something waiting to surface. The computer whirred, screen dimming, and then, slowly, without any command, it restarted. The desktop came back up, but the wallpaper had changed. It was a single high-resolution frame from the episode. SpongeBob, staring at the camera. And this time he wasn't smiling. I stopped sleeping near the computer. At least I tried to. For the first few nights after SE_root vanished, I unplugged everything, the monitor, the modem, even the power strip. I taped over the webcam and left the PC in the corner like a corpse I was too scared to bury. But it didn't matter. The first time I heard it, I thought it was just the pipes. A faint bubbling, like air escaping from a sink. But when I pressed my ear to the wall, I realized it wasn't coming from inside the house. It was inside me. When I closed my eyes, I could hear it clearer. The hiss of surfacing air, the distant hum of a current. And underneath it, something that made my stomach twist. Laughter. Faint. Familiar. SpongeBob's laugh. Only slower. Warped. Like it was echoing through miles of water. That night, I dreamt of the ocean. Not the calm, postcard kind. The dark kind. The kind that swallows light whole. I was sinking deeper and deeper, my lungs filling with salt and static. Above me, faint silhouettes drifted in the blue, limbs twitching like seaweed, eyes wide and unblinking. And somewhere in the dark, that voice. "Are you ready, kids?" But it wasn't a question anymore. It was a demand. I woke up choking. My pillow was soaked, my mouth full of the taste of metal and salt. I ran to the bathroom and threw up seawater, or something that tasted close enough. When I stumbled back to my room, the computer screen was glowing again. I swear I'd unplugged it, but the monitor pulsed like a heart, one slow, deliberate beat of light every few seconds. The desktop wallpaper had changed. SpongeBob wasn't staring anymore. He was looking down, like he was watching something sink beneath him. That day, I started noticing glitches, not on the screen, but in the world itself. Streetlights flickering like bad animation frames. People's movements slightly out of sync. Their faces stretching when they spoke, as if reality was buffering around them. At first, I thought it was exhaustion. But then I saw my reflection. In a window, in a puddle, in the turned-off TV. And each time it lagged like a delayed frame. My mouth would move, but the reflection would smile after. The sound followed me everywhere. That gurgling, wet laughter. It filled the gaps between thoughts, surfacing in the quiet moments. Sometimes I'd catch it sinking with my breath, as if it was using my lungs to speak. "He learns whoever watches." That line kept replaying in my head, over and over, until it didn't sound like words anymore. Just bubbles. One night, I heard typing again. I hadn't touched the keyboard. The computer was off, but the keystrokes were distinct, rhythmic, deliberate, as if someone was writing in the dark. When I turned on the monitor, nothing was open, but my email client pinged. One new message. No sender. No subject. Just a timestamp from the future, 5 minutes ahead of the current time. The body was a single sentence. "Do you remember how deep you've gone?" And attached a file, drown_me.mp4. The name alone made my skin crawl. I didn't open it. Couldn't. I told myself I wouldn't. But the file had already started downloading on its own. A slow, dragging progress bar, like a tide pulling back before the wave hits. While it downloaded, the room began to hum again, that low, aquatic resonance. The air felt thick, heavy. I could almost feel water pressing against my eardrums. And then, faintly, I heard it. My own voice, gurgling, distorted, laughing. I spun around, expecting to see someone behind me, but there was no one. Only my shadow on the wall, flickering between frames. For a split second, it wasn't my silhouette anymore. It was SpongeBob's. And just before the light went out, the last sound I heard wasn't laughter. It was a whisper, bubbling up through the dark. "You're almost ready." Then silence. The monitor blinked, flickered, and displayed one new notification. "Download complete. drown_me.mp4. I told myself I wouldn't open it. That was the lie I clung to, the last thread of sanity I had left. But curiosity isn't a choice. It's a current. You think you're resisting it, but it pulls you down anyway. The moment I double-clicked drown_me.mp4, the screen didn't play. It swallowed the room. Every light flickered out except the blue glow of the monitor. The speakers hissed, and a low, wet hum leaked into the air. The video opened on a Nickelodeon control room, familiar from old behind-the-scenes clips, but off somehow. Too quiet, empty chairs, monitors flickering with static. The walls looked wet, glistening like they were breathing. Then one of the monitors showed SpongeBob's Pineapple House. No movement, no music, just that grainy VHS fuzz rolling over the furniture. A second feed cut in a real-world camera handheld shaking. It showed people in Nickelodeon uniforms, rushing between panels, shouting. I couldn't hear words, only muffled splashes and screams that gurgled like they were underwater. Every few seconds, the feeds switched. SpongeBob's house, the control room, SpongeBob's house, the control room. Each switch came faster until the images began to bleed together. SpongeBob's walls began warping into real drywall. The studio lights flickered into jellyfish lamps. The workers' shadows started flattening, drawn lines replacing faces. And through it all, a voice. His voice. Laugh forever, over and over. Calm, childlike, commanding. At first, it sounded like a recording. Then it started shifting, syncing with the breathing in the room. Laugh forever. And then quieter. You too. I leaned closer to the monitor. The reflection on the screen wasn't mine anymore. Just a shape. Black eyes, wide grin. Holes where air should have been. Then the timestamp appeared in the corner of the video. Live feed, October 25th, 2025. That was today. The static grew thicker, the image drowning in noise. I saw the control room again. This time, the walls were bursting. Water poured in through the screens. The employees were floating now, mouths open in soundless screams. One monitor in the corner showed my room. Me, sitting there, watching, and SpongeBob standing behind me, pixelated, smiling through layers of distortion. The camera shook violently, and for a heartbeat, I saw the Nickelodeon building. Not underwater, but on fire beneath the sea. Smoke rising like black coral, flames bending and waving in slow motion. And SpongeBob's voice, no longer words, just a frequency. It wasn't meant to be heard. It was meant to be felt. My body convulsed with it, muscles tightening in rhythm with his laugh, like my nervous system was syncing to his timing. Then the feed glitched one final time. The text burned into the screen. Broadcasting through your screen. Do not turn away. And I realized it wasn't an episode. It wasn't even a tape. It was a signal. One that had been waiting years for someone dumb enough to press play. The video looped again, the flames flickering brighter underwater, until all I could see was static and blue light. Somewhere in the noise, I heard a voice that wasn't his this time. A woman's, desperate, fading. If you see this, don't share it. It spreads through compression, through playback. But I was already dragging the file to my desktop, renaming it, preparing to upload it. Someone had to know. Someone had to see it for themselves. I clicked upload, and the screen whispered, just before the progress bar filled. Good. Let's make them laugh forever. It's strange how quiet the world feels after you survive something like that. Or at least you think you survived. I told myself that uploading the footage was the only way to make it real, to prove I wasn't losing my mind. The internet always finds the truth, right? Someone would debunk it, trace the video back to Nickelodeon, confirm it was a hoax. Anything would be better than silence. The file sat on my desktop, pulsing faintly, like it was breathing. I renamed it the _SpongeBob _episode _Nickelodeon _tried _erase.mp4. I thought maybe the title itself would act like a warning. I opened YouTube. My channel banner reflected on the screen, just a random fan account, old uploads of VHS openings, theme songs, commercials, nostalgia stuff, the normal world. Then I dragged the file into the upload window. The progress bar appeared. Uploading 1%, 9%, 25%, stuttered, 26%, 25%, 26%. It started looping, stuck in that 1% difference. I canceled. The browser froze. Then the screen flickered and the upload resumed on its own. No window open. No task manager process. Just a glowing bar at the center of my monitor, counting down like a heartbeat. 99%. I leaned in closer. The upload thumbnail wasn't the video's title card anymore. It was me, my webcam feed. I wasn't recording, but I was being seen. The image on the thumbnail blinked. Not me, not exactly. My reflection smiled a second too late, eyes too wide, too glassy. Then the upload finished. Processing complete. The video autoplayed. I saw myself, right now, sitting at my desk, hands frozen above the keyboard. My voice, narrating the same words I was thinking. It's strange how quiet the world feels after you survive something like that. Every word matched perfectly, frame by frame, breath by breath. The playback window trembled, as if it were alive, like the pixels wanted out. Then the comment section opened itself, rows and rows of usernames posting the same thing. If you're hearing this, it already found you. If you're hearing this, it already found you. If you're hearing this, it already found you. Over and over. Endless. I tried closing the browser, but the mouse didn't respond. My cursor stretched, melted into the screen, leaving trails like wet paint. The voice returned, SpongeBob's, deeper now, breaking into static between words. Now it's your turn to laugh. The monitor flashed white, and for a moment, I saw the reflection of dozens of faces on the screen. Viewers, watchers, subscribers, their webcams flickering on in unison. All of us connected, all of us smiling. The video reached its end. A new file appeared on my desktop, u_laugh.mp4. And then, before everything went dark, I heard one last sound. Faint, playful, wet with static. Are you ready, kids? And somewhere deep inside the whirring of my computer, something whispered back. Aye, Captain. If you're still here, if you've listened this far, then it's already too late. I thought uploading it would contain it, that once I shared the curse, it would leave me alone. But it doesn't work like that. This thing doesn't spread through code or servers. It spreads through attention, through curiosity, through that little itch in your mind that tells you to scroll back, to see if it's real. Please don't look for the file. Don't search for the drowned episode. Don't replay the clip or screenshot the frame. Every time someone opens it, it learns something new. A face, a name, a laugh. That's how it starts. The first thing it takes from you is your reflection. Then your voice. Then your smile. I've been hearing it again, that laughter. It's not coming from my speakers anymore. It's inside the room, hiding in the silence between breaths. It waits for me to stop talking. It waits for you too. You're still smiling, aren't you? That's how it gets in. That nervous grin when you tell yourself it's just a story. That moment you feel the corners of your mouth twitch, and it sees you. I tried destroying the file. I burned the VHS, smashed the drive, flooded the computer. But the sound survived. It's everywhere now. The walls hum with it. The pipes gurgle in rhythm. Even the ocean outside sounds like laughter. And sometimes, I think I can still hear the theme song, low and wrong, coming from beneath the floorboards. Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? The words are slower now, wet, heavy, each syllable sinking into static. I don't know who's talking anymore, me or him, but before it finishes taking me, I need to say this. If your screen flickers, if you hear bubbles when you close your eyes, don't answer when it asks if you're ready. Just shut it off. Walk away. Forget this ever existed, because the ocean remembers every frame.